Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, and today I'll be reading an Arlecchino Listener by me, so let's get into it. The snow fell softly outside the large windows of the room, the warm glow of the fireplace casting dancing shadows on the walls. You were sitting across from Arlecchino at a small table, the two of you reviewing plans for an upcoming mission. Her crimson eyes were focused on the map, spread out between you, her usual stoic expression in place. You admired her composure, though you could never quite shake the flutter in your chest whenever she was near. "You'll take this route," she said, pointing to a narrow mountain pass on the map. "It's less exposed, safer." You raised an eyebrow. Safer or more predictable? Her gaze flicked up to meet yours, and a faint smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. "Do you doubt my judgment?" "No, not at all," you replied, leaning back in your chair. "I am just wondering if you're starting to go soft on me." "Hardly," she said, her tone sharp but playful. "If anything, I'm ensuring you don't end up as another liability you have to clean up after." Your heart skipped a beat at the way her eyes lingered on you for just a moment too long, before she returned to the map. The banter between you had always been laced with an underlying tension, a connection neither of you had dared to acknowledge. Until now, it had been easier to leave it unspoken, tucked away behind layers of duty and professionalism. But tonight felt different. "Arlecchino," you said softly, your tone more serious than you intended. She looked up, her crimson eyes narrowing slightly in curiosity. "Why do you care so much? About my safety, I mean." For a moment, her expression faltered, and you caught a glimpse of something softer, something vulnerable. But just as quickly, she schooled her features into neutrality. "Because you're valuable," she said simply. "To the mission." "Just the mission?" You pressed, unable to stop yourself. And her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came out. The silence stretched between you, heavy with unsaid things. And finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "What are you trying to say?" You hesitated, the words caught in your throat. How could you possibly explain what you'd been feeling all this time? The way your heart raced whenever she was near, the way you found yourself drawn to her, despite her sharp edges and cold demeanor. And before you could answer, you both reached toward the map at the same time. Your hands brushed, and the contact sent a jolt through you, as if the air around you had shifted. You looked up, realizing how close you both were. Her face was mere inches from yours, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and something you couldn't quite place. "Arlecchino," he whispered, your voice barely audible. And she didn't respond, her gaze locked on yours. And time seemed to slow as the distance between you disappeared. And before either of you could process what was happening, your lips met. The kiss was brief, barely more than a fleeting moment, but it felt like the world had shifted beneath your feet. You both pulled back simultaneously, eyes wide as the weight of what just happened sank in. You began, your voice shaky. "I didn't mean to." Arlecchino held up a hand, silencing you. Her cheeks were faintly flushed, a rare crack in her otherwise composed exterior. "Don't," she said, her voice firm, but not unkind. "You don't have to explain." "But I know," she interrupted, her gaze softening as she looked at you. I have known for a while. Your heart pounded in your chest, her words sinking in. Then why didn't you say anything? You asked, your voice barely above a whisper. And she exhaled softly, her expression unreadable. Because you couldn't afford to, she admitted. Feelings like this, they make things complicated. They make people vulnerable. And yet, you kissed me back. He pointed out, a small smile tugging at your lips. And her eyes met yours, and for the first time, you saw something unguarded in her gaze. Something that was different. From Arlecchino the knave, the forest harbinger, the father of the house. She was just her. Arlecchino, without being any of these things. Maybe I'm tired of pretending, she said quietly, in a voice more fragile than you've ever heard. And the honesty in her words took your breath away. For so long, you had thought her feelings were hidden behind an impenetrable wall. But perhaps even that wall could crumble. And right now you were seeing that happen in real time. Arlie, you don't have to pretend anymore, he said softly, reaching out to take her hand. And surprisingly enough, she didn't pull away, her fingers curling around yours. And neither do you, she replied, her voice steady, but still laced with that vulnerability that made your chest ache. For the first time, the tension between you did not feel like a barrier. Instead, it felt like a promise, one that you were finally ready to embrace. The rest of the world faded away as you sat there. In this moment, that would change everything for you too. Your hands intertwined, as the weight of unspoken words and stolen glances had finally lifted.